the children were always called Blue Eyes and Turkey. The elder was most like her dear father, who was far away at sea, and the mother would often say,
"Child, you've taken your father's eyes."
For the father had the bluest of blue eyes. When the younger one was still a baby, her loud, rapid gurgling brought to mind the gobble of a beloved turkey that lived near the village. Along with a new baby, the mother and Blue Eyes and Turkey all lived together in a lonely cottage at the edge of the forest. The forest was so near that the garden at the back seemed to be part of it, and the tall fir trees were so close that their big black arms stretched over the little thatched roof, and when the moon shone upon them, their tangled shadows were all over the whitewashed walls. It was a long way to the village, nearly 1.5 miles, and the mother had to work very hard and had no time to go herself to see if there was a letter at the post office from the dear father. The 2 children were very proud of being able to go alone, and when they came back tired from the long walk, there would be the mother waiting and watching for them, and the tea would be ready and the baby crowing with delight, and if by any chance there was a letter from the sea, then they were very happy indeed. The cottage room was so cozy. The walls were as white as snow, and against them hung cake tins and baking dishes, the lid of a large saucepan, and the fish slice, polished and shining bright as ever. On one side of the fireplace, above the bellows, hung the clock that always struck the wrong hour and was always running down too soon. But it was a good clock, with a little picture on its face. The baby's high chair stood in one corner, and in another there was a cupboard hung up high, in which the mother kept all manner of little surprises.
"Dear children,"
the mother said one afternoon late in the autumn,
"it is very chilly for you to go to the village. Don't be long now. Go the nearest way, and don't look at any strangers you meet, and be sure you do not talk with them."
She kissed them and called them dear good children, and they joyfully started on their way. The village was gayer than usual, for there had been a fair the day before, and the people who had made merry still hung about the streets as if reluctant to own that their holiday was over.
I wish we'd have come yesterday. Then we might have seen something. Look there!
Turkey pointed to a stall covered with gingerbread, but the children had no money. At the end of the street, close to where the coaches stopped, an old man sat on the ground with his back resting against the wall of a house, and by him were 2 dogs. Evidently they were dancing dogs, the children thought, and longed to see them perform, but they seemed as tired as their master, and sat quite still beside him, looking as if they had not even a single wag left in their tails.
Oh, I do wish we'd been here yesterday,
Blue Eyes said again as they went on to the grocer's, which was also the post office. The postmistress was very busy weighing out half-pounds of coffee, and when she had time to attend to the children, she only said that she had nothing for them and went on with what she was doing. Blue Eyes and Turkey turned away to return home, back slowly down the village street, past the man with the dogs again. One dog now sat up rather crookedly, looking very melancholy and rather ridiculous. They had walked some way, and just before they reached the bridge, they noticed, resting against a pile of stones, a strange, dark figure. At first, they thought it was someone asleep. Then they thought it was a poor old woman, ill and hungry, and then they saw that it was a strange, wild-looking girl who seemed very unhappy, and they felt sure that something was the matter. So they thought they would ask her to see if there was anything they could do to help her. The girl seemed to be tall and about 15 years old. She was dressed in very ragged clothes. Around her shoulders there was an old brown shawl, which was torn at the corner that hung down the middle of her back. She wore no bonnet, and an old yellow handkerchief which she had tied around her head had fallen backwards and was all huddled up around her neck. Her hair was coal black and hung down, uncombed and unfastened, just anyhow. It was not very long, but it was very shiny, and it seemed to match her bright black eyes and her dark freckled skin. On her feet were coarse gray stockings and thick, shabby boots, which she had evidently forgotten to lace up. She had something hidden away under her shawl, but the children did not know what it was. She did not move or stir till they were within a yard of her. Then she wiped her eyes as if she had been crying bitterly and looked up. The children stood in front of her for a moment, wondering what they ought to do.
"Are you crying?"
Turkey asked shyly. To their surprise, she said in an almost cheerful voice,
"Oh dear, no. Not at all. Quite the contrary. Are you?"
They felt half a mind to walk away, for anyone could see that they were not crying.
Perhaps you are lost?
Certainly not. How could I be lost when you have just found me? Besides, I live nearby.
The children were surprised at this, for they had never seen her before, and yet they thought they knew all the village folk by sight.
"What are you sitting on?"
On a pear drum.
The children wondered at the girl's most cheerful voice, for she looked cold and uncomfortable.
"What is a pear drum?"
I'm surprised you don't know. Most anyone in good society has one.
And then she pulled it out and displayed it for them. The curious instrument was vaguely guitar-shaped, with 3 strings and 2 pegs by which to tune them. The 3rd string was never tuned at all, and thus added to the singular effect produced by the village girl's music. And yet, oddly, the pear drum was not played by touching its strings, but by turning a little handle cunningly hidden on one side. But the strange thing about the pear drum was not the music it made, or the strings, or the handle, but a little square box attached to one side. The box had a little flat lid that appeared to be opened by a spring. That was all the children could make out at first. They were most anxious to see inside the box, or to know what it contained, but they thought it might look curious to say so. The girl looked at her instrument with affection.
It really is a most beautiful thing, a pear drum. It cost a great deal of money. I am very rich.
And this, the children thought, a really remarkable statement, for they had not supposed that rich people dressed in old clothes or went about without bonnets. She might at least have done her hair, they thought.
"You don't look rich."
Turkey blurted in as polite a voice as possible.
Perhaps not.
"You look rather shabby."
Indeed? Well, a little shabbiness is very respectable. Just ask the others.
She picked up the little box by the side of the pear drum, and the children wondered what she meant. Opening it, she spoke inside, as if there was someone who could hear her.
They've said I look rather shabby. Can you believe it? They don't believe I'm rich.
You're not speaking to anyone.
Oh, yes, I am. I'm speaking to them both.
She looked down at the box in her hands.
I have in here a little man and a little woman to match. He's dressed as a peasant, and she's in a red petticoat with a white handkerchief pinned across her chest. When I play, they dance most beautifully.
Oh, let us
see.
The children cried with desperate curiosity. The village girl looked back at them with doubt in her eyes, finally saying,
I'm afraid that I'm not sure if I can.
Why not?
Well, tell me, are you good children?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh, yes,
we are very good.
Very good.
She closed the lid of the box as the children stared with astonishment.
That was my worry. I'm afraid it's quite impossible.
But
we are
They
good.
cried again, thinking she had misheard.
We are really very good, we promise. Mother always says so.
Yes, I heard you before.
Then can't you let us see the dancing man and woman?
Oh dear, no. They can only be seen by naughty children.
Naughty children?
Oh yes, and the worse the children are, the better the dancing becomes. I really hoped to share it with you, I really did. If only you weren't so good.
It was as if she was accusing them of some terrible crime. She put the pear drum carefully under her ragged cloak and prepared to go on her way.
It requires a great deal of skill, being naughty. Well then, good day.
And swiftly, she walked away.
Will we find you in the village tomorrow?
The girl continued on her way, while the children felt their eyes fill with tears and their hearts ache with disappointment. When their mother saw them, she was greatly astonished, and, fearing they were hurt, ran to meet them.
Oh, my dear children, what is the matter?
But they did not dare tell their mother about the village girl. They promised that was wrong.
But then why are you crying? Poor children, you must be tired and hungry. After tea, you'll feel much, much better.
And she went back to the cottage, opening the window to let in the sweet, fresh air, and put the kettle on to boil. After placing the bread and tea things on the table, she called her daughters in a loving voice.
Dear children, come and have your tea.
But the children made no answer to their dear mother. They only stood still by the window and said nothing. Then Blue Eyes and Turkey turned round, and when they saw the tall loaf baked crisp and brown, and the cups all in a row, and the jug of milk all waiting for them, they went to the table and sat down and felt a little happier. And the mother bounced the baby on her knee and sang little songs and laughed, and they thought of the father far away at sea, and wondered what he would say to them all when he came home again. Then she looked up and saw that Turkey's eyes were full of tears.
My dear little turkey, what is the matter? Come to mother, my sweet. Come to your mother.
Putting down the baby, she held out her arms, and Turkey, getting up from her chair, ran swiftly into them, sobbing.
Oh, Mother. Oh, dear Mother, I do so want to be naughty.
And then Blue Eyes left her chair also, and, rubbing her face against her mother's shoulder, cried sadly,
And so do I, Mother. Oh, I'd give anything to be very, very naughty.
But my dear children, why do you want to be naughty? I should be very angry if you were naughty. But you could never be, for it would make me so unhappy.
Why couldn't we?
The mother thought a while before she answered, and when she did so, they hardly understood, perhaps because she seemed to be speaking rather to herself than to them.
Because if one truly loves, then that love is stronger than all the bad feelings and conquers them. If the love is real, unkindness and wickedness have no power over it.
The girls didn't know what she meant, and they continued crying.
We do love you. We do.
Huh, then wipe the tears from your eyes.
But we want to be naughty.
Then I should know you did not love me.
If we were very, very, very naughty and wouldn't be good, no matter what?
I should try to make you better.
But if you couldn't?
The mother's eyes filled with tears, a sob almost choking her.
If you wouldn't be good, no matter what, I should have to go away and leave you.
You couldn't.
Yes, I could, but it would make me so unhappy.
But we must have a mother. We're only children.
I'd send you a new mother, with glass eyes and a wooden tail. But I will never leave you as long as you love me.
We won't be naughty. We will be good. We should hate the new mother, and she should never come here.
And they clung to their own mother and kissed her fondly. But when they went to bed, they sobbed bitterly, for they remembered the little dancing man and woman and longed more than ever to see them. But how could they bear to hurt their own mother in that way?
Good day.
Blue Eyes and Turkey approached the girl, who was once again sitting by the heap of stones. It was as if she had never moved from the day before.
The weather is really charming.
The children took no notice of her greeting.
Are the little man and woman there?
Of course. They are both here and quite well. The little man tips his hat to the lady. It is so romantic. And the little woman has heard a secret. She tells it while she dances.
The children begged to see.
Quite impossible, I assure you. You are too good.
But Mother says if we are naughty, she will go away and send home a new mother.
Indeed, that is what they all say.
What do you mean?
They all threaten that kind of thing. But I fear you could not be naughty even if you tried.
Please show us, and we will be so naughty when we return home.
Certainly not beforehand.
But if we are very naughty tonight, will you show them to us when we return?
Questions asked today are always better answered tomorrow.
The girl turned round and walked on. For a few minutes they stood still looking after her. Then they broke down and cried. Turkey was the first to wipe away her tears. Together, all the way home, they planned how to begin being naughty. And that afternoon, the dear mother was sorely distressed, for instead of sitting at their tea as usual with smiling, happy faces, they broke their mugs and threw their bread and butter on the floor. And when their mother told them to do one thing, they carefully went and did another. And as for helping to put away, they left her to do it all by herself, and only stamped their feet with rage when she told them to go upstairs until they were good.
We won't be good. We hate being good.
We like being naughty very much.
Don't you remember what I told you I should do if you were very, very naughty?
There is no mother with a wooden tail and glass eyes, and if there were, we should just stick pins in her and send her away. But there is none.
Then the mother's sadness became anger at last, and she sent them off to bed. They spent the night laughing with joy, jumping in their beds and singing merry songs at the top of their voices. The next morning, without asking, the children got up and ran off as fast as they could over the fields towards the bridge to look for the village girl. She was sitting, as usual, by the heap of stones with the pear drum under her shawl. They told her the things they had done and how angry their mother had been. But the girl kept the pear drum carefully hidden.
We were very naughty. So naughty we were sent to bed.
If you were really naughty, you wouldn't have gone to bed at all. But, you see, you can't help it. It takes such skill to be naughty well.
But we broke our mugs and we dropped our bread to the floor. The kitchen was foul.
Mere trifles. Did you throw cold water on the fire? Did you break the clock? Did you pull all the tins down from the walls and throw them on the floor?
No.
Exclaimed the children, aghast.
We could not do that.
I thought not. So many people mistake a little noise and foolishness for real naughtiness. Well, good day.
And before they could say another word, she had vanished. So the children went home and did all the things she said. They threw water on the fire. They pulled down the baking dish and the cake tin, the fish slice and the lid of the saucepan, and banged them on the floor. They broke the clock and danced on the butter. They turned everything upside down, and then they sat still and wondered if they were naughty enough. And when the mother saw all that they had done, she did not scold them as she had before. She just broke down and cried, and then looked at the children and said sadly,
My poor Blue Eyes and Turkey, what has become of you? Unless you are good tomorrow, unless you show me that you love me, I shall indeed have to go away and come back no more. And the new mother I told you of will come to you.
They did not believe her, yet their hearts ached when they saw how unhappy she looked, and they thought within themselves that once they had seen the little man and woman dance, they would be good forever afterwards. The next morning, before the birds were stirring or the flowers had wiped their eyes ready for the day, the children crept out of the cottage and ran across the fields. They did not think the village girl would be up so very early, but their hearts had ached so much at the sight of their mother's sad face that they had not been able to sleep, and they longed to know if they had been naughty enough, and if they might just once hear the pear drum and see the little man and woman dance. To their surprise, they found the village girl sitting by the heap of stones, and they noticed that the box containing the little man and woman was open, but she closed it quickly when she saw them. They excitedly told her everything they'd done. The girl looked at them curiously, then drew the yellow silk handkerchief that she sometimes wore around her head out of her pocket, and began smoothing out the creases in it with her hands.
You seem really quite excited.
But the girl only went on smoothing out her handkerchief.
I'm so very particular about my dress.
They could hardly listen to her in their excitement.
We have been so very naughty, and Mother says she will go away today and send home a new mother if we are not good.
Indeed, there is an endless variety in language. The things people say are so singular and amusing.
The children did not understand.
But if she goes, what shall we do?
People go and people come. First they go, and then they come. Perhaps she will go before she comes. She really couldn't come before she goes. Oh, you had better go back and be good. You're really not clever enough to be anything else.
But we did all the things you told us.
You didn't throw the looking glass out of the window or stand the baby on its head.
No, we didn't do that.
I thought not. Well, good day. I shall not be here tomorrow.
Please just let us see them once.
Well, I shall go past your cottage at 11 o'clock this morning. Perhaps I shall play the pear drum as I go by.
And will you show us the man and woman?
Quite impossible, unless you really deserved it. Make-believe naughtiness is only spoiled goodness. It's a waste of time, I fear. But of course, I should not like to interfere with you. 11 o'clock, I shall be quite punctual. I'm very particular about my engagements.
Then again the children went home and were naughty, oh, so very, very naughty that the dear mother's heart ached and her eyes filled with tears, and at last she went upstairs and slowly put on her best gown and her new sunbonnet. And she dressed the baby all in its Sunday clothes, and then she came down and stood before Blue Eyes and Turkey. And just as she did so, Turkey threw the looking-glass out of the window, and it fell with a loud crash upon the ground.
Goodbye, my children. Goodbye, my blue eyes. Goodbye, my turkey. Oh, my poor children.
Weeping bitterly, the mother kissed the children and took the baby into her arms.
The new mother will be here presently.
It seemed as if the children were spellbound, and they could not follow her. They opened the window wide and called after her, but the mother only looked round and shook her head, and they could see the tears falling down her cheeks. They cried and cried, but still the mother went across the fields. Just before she could no longer be seen, she stopped and turned and waved her handkerchief, all wet with tears, to the children at the window. She made the baby kiss its hand, and in a moment, mother and baby had vanished from their sight. Then the children felt their hearts ache with sorrow, and they cried bitterly just as their mother had done, and they could not believe that she had gone. Surely she would come back, they thought. She would not leave them altogether, but oh, if she did. And then the broken clock struck 11, and they looked at each other, while their hearts stood still, and they rushed to the open window. They saw the village girl coming towards them from the fields, dancing along and playing the pear drum as she did so. Behind her, walking slowly, was the man with the dogs whom they had seen on the first day they met the girl. He was playing a flute with a strange, shrill sound, and after the man followed the two dogs, slowly waltzing round and round on their hind leg.
"We have done all you told us,"
Blue Eyes called when she had recovered from the astonishment.
Come and see.
The girl did not cease her playing or her dancing, but called out above the music,
You did it all badly. You threw the water on the wrong side of the fire. The tin things were not quite in the middle of the room. The clock was not broken enough. You did not stand the baby on its head.
But our mother has gone away. Show us the little man and woman now and let us hear the secret.
The girl was just in front of the cottage, but she did not stop playing. The sound of the strings seemed to go through their hearts. She did not stop dancing. She was already passing by the cottage. And still the man followed her, playing shrilly on his flute, and still the two dogs waltzed round and round after him. On they went, all of them, together. The children ran from the house, begging the girl to stop and show them the dancing couple. She turned around, still dancing to the music, and held the box out before them.
The little man and the woman have gone away. See, their box is empty.
And then, for the first time, the children saw that the lid of the box was raised and hanging back, and that no little man and woman were in it.
But our mother is gone. Will she ever come back?
The girl turned and continued on towards the long road leading out of the city.
No, she'll never come back. I saw her by the bridge. She took a boat up on the river. She is sailing to the sea. She will meet your father once again, and they will go sailing to countries far away.
The children cried out but could say no more, for their hearts seemed to be breaking. Then the girl, her voice getting fainter and fainter in the distance, called out once more to them before vanishing altogether.
Your new mother is coming. She is already on her way.
The children looked at each other, and the little cottage home, that only a week before had been so bright and happy, so cozy and so spotless. The fire was out, and the tins and dishes and bits of bread were all lying on the floor, and there was the broken clock, no time on its face. There was the cupboard on the wall, no sweet surprise on its shelf, and the baby's high chair, but no little baby to sit in it. In the midst of it all stood the children, looking at the wreck they had made.
I wish we had never seen the village girl at all.
Surely Mother will come back. She knows we shall die if she doesn't come back.
I don't know what we shall do if the new mother comes. I shall never, never like any other mother.
We won't let her in. We will bolt the door and shut the window, and we won't take any notice when she knocks.
So they bolted the door and shut the window, and all through the afternoon they sat watching and listening for fear of the new mother. But they saw and heard nothing of her, and gradually they became less and less afraid lest she should come. When it was dinner time, they were very hungry, but they could only find some stale bread. Then they thought that perhaps when it was dark, their own dear mother would come home, and she would forgive them. And then Blue Eyes thought that when their mother returned, she would be very cold. So they crept out the back door to gather wood, and at last they made a fire. With the fire burning bright, they began to be happy again, and to feel certain that their own mother would return. and the sight of the pleasant fire reminded them of all the times she had waited for them to come home from the post office, and of how she had welcomed them and comforted them and given them nice warm tea and sweetbread and talked to them. Oh, how sorry they were they had been naughty, and all for that nasty village girl. They did not care a bit about the little man and woman now, or want to hear the secret. They fetched a pail of water and washed the floor. They scrubbed the tins till they looked bright again, and, putting a footstool on a chair, carefully hung the things in their places. And then they picked up the broken mugs and made the room as neat as they could. They took down the tea tray and got out the cups and put the kettle on the fire to boil, and made everything look as home-like as they could, till it looked as if their dear mother's hands had been busy about it. At last all was ready, and Blue Eyes and Turkey washed their faces and their hands, and then sat and waited. The children had fallen asleep, and the fire was dim and low when a loud knocking at the door woke them at the table. Their hearts stood still as the terrible knocking rang again. They knew it could not be their own mother, for she would have turned the handle and tried to come in without knocking at all.
The new mother is here. What shall we do? We won't let her in.
And again came a loud and horrible knocking at the door.
We won't go away!
The awful hammering continued. Blue Eyes, in fear and trembling, put her back against the door as Turkey went to the window, peeping out. She could just see a black satin bonnet with a frill around the edge and a long, bony arm carrying a black leather bag. For a second, she swore she saw the flashing of 2 glass eyes.
What shall we do?
The door shook and rattled with the terrible knocking. Afraid it would break, Turkey joined with her back against the door, and the rattling stopped. For a long, terrible moment, all was still. Perhaps the new mother had made up her mind to go away. And then, with a fearful blow, the little painted door was cracked and splintered. With a shriek, the children darted from the spot and fled out the back door into the forest beyond. All night long they stayed in the darkness and the cold, and all the next day, and when the darkness had fallen and the night was still once again, hand in hand, Blue Eyes and Turkey crept back to the home where they were once so happy, and, with beating hearts, they looked through the window. The mother was at the stove. Her long, heavy wooden tail thumped into the cabinets as she turned, blinding the children with the glare of her cracked glass eyes.
Jack and Emily, a brother and sister, both in their early 20s, were on their way to visit their grandmother. It was supposed to be a simple trip, an afternoon drive through the countryside, but Jack had insisted on taking a shortcut through the woods. Emily, always the more cautious of the two, reluctantly agreed. The road soon turned narrow and winding, flanked by dense trees that twisted and stretched closer and closer. The sun vanished behind the crooked branches above, and with it any sense of direction. The siblings drove on in uneasy silence, neither one willing to admit just how anxious they felt.
Jack, I think we're lost,
Emily eventually said, her voice trembling.
The road only goes one way or the other,
Jack replied with annoyance.
Time's just passing slowly because it all looks the same.
I guess,
Emily replied softly.
Don't worry, we'll find our way,
Jack replied, though he didn't sound convinced. Hours passed as their car continued on through a maze of trees. The plans to visit their grandmother now seemed like a vague memory, and the fuel gauge was getting dangerously close to empty. Just as panic began to set in, they spotted a dim light through the fog. As they got closer, they could make out the bold neon letters of a quaint diner sign. "Hot to go," it read. "Home-cooked meals fast." Beside the diner entrance was a pair of gas pumps below a no self-serve sign. The structure looked completely out of place, but desperation led them to the door, and as they entered, a bell tinkled softly. The interior was inviting, filled with the comforting, nostalgic smells of savory meats, warm, fresh bread, and sugary sweets. An old woman stood behind the counter, her eyes twinkling with that strange familiarity that provides instant relief.
Welcome, dears,
she said with a kind smile.
You must be hungry.
Her voice was soothing like a lullaby. Jack and Emily nodded, their stomachs rumbling. The woman who introduced herself as Greta led them to a booth and handed them menus.
I'll fix a couple suppers to go, but won't you join me for a bite before I fill your tank?
She asked.
Fuel up while you fuel up? I just finished a pot of my most famous stew. It's the house special.
The siblings, famished and tired, agreed. They watched as the woman stepped behind the counter where a massive vat of stew boiled over a small fire. With a cheerful smile, Greta ladled a large helping for each of the siblings and returned to the table in a cloud of steam. The aroma was intoxicating, a mix of fragrant spices that made their mouths water. Chopped vegetables and heavy chunks of meat danced in the thick and bubbling red broth. Jack took the first bite and couldn't help but groan with pleasure.
Holy cow,
he said, shoveling more into his mouth.
This is amazing.
Emily followed suit and nearly danced in her seat as the flavors exploded across her tongue. Somehow sweet, savory, and spicy all at once, but not overwhelming. Neither of them normally cared for spicy foods, but Greta's stew was intoxicating. They ate ravenously, their hunger growing with each bite. The more they ate, the more they wanted. The broth coated their mouths, lubricating their throats, a greasy, slick sensation that left them both craving and repulsed. They couldn't stop, their hands mechanically scooping chunks of tender meat and soft vegetables and tearing into the bread, soaking it in the broth to make swallowing easier. Before long, their limbs felt heavy. Their heads began to swim. The diner seemed to shift and pulse around them, like a hidden heartbeat in the walls. Colors blurred and sharpened around them, the lights coming in and out of focus, like the air above was filled with shooting stars. Jack's tongue felt almost too thick to speak.
I don't feel so good,
he slurred. Emily nodded, her eyes wide with fear. But they couldn't stop. They continued painfully shoveling spoonfuls of stew into their mouths as Greta appeared with a fresh pot and loaf of bread. They ate and ate, chewing and swallowing, gulping and nearly choking. And with every bite, they felt more and more energy draining from their bodies. When Greta returned with yet another helping for each of them, the siblings noticed that the old woman was looking much more youthful now. Her wrinkles had been smoothed away, and the color of her hair emboldened. Even the diner itself seemed to be transforming around them into something newer, cleaner. Jack and Emily exchanged a dazed glance as creeping horror settled in. And Emily tried her best to push the bowl away. But it was like the spoon was glued to her hand. Jack tried to stand, but his butt wouldn't budge from the bench below.
Oh, you can't leave yet, my dears.
Greta grinned widely, her eyes sparkling like the lights around her.
You haven't finished your supper.
It seemed impossible. But as the siblings consumed the stew consumed the siblings, stealing away their youth with every slurp and swallow. Greta was even younger looking now, barely older than the pair of siblings themselves. But now, Jack and Emily looked much older than they were, with gaunt, leathering skin and sunken eyes. The lights stopped glittering, and the diner's walls stopped pulsing, as the edges of the room began to darken and swirl. To Emily's horror, Jack face-planted into his soup, the air bubbles rising to the top of the bowl, coating his bangs with broth. Her brother twitched in his seat, but he couldn't raise his head from the bowl. He was too weak. His entire body was lead, unable to support the heavy boulder that was now his head. In a matter of seconds, he would drown. Using every ounce of energy she had, Emily threw herself forward, freeing Jack from certain death and knocking both bowls to the floor where the stew splashed everywhere. The broth sizzled and burned through the linoleum like acid, emitting a horrible stench of decay. And Greta screamed as if her own body was being burned.
You ungrateful brats,
she hissed, advancing on them. As her face twisted in fury, the mask of youth came loose, and the old hag beneath was revealed once again, her bony hands stretched and twisted into wicked claws, and she lunged for them with shocking speed. Jack and Emily were slowly regaining their energy, and Jack finally broke free from the weight that had held him down. He grabbed Emily's hand, helping her to her feet, and they stumbled together like drunks towards the door as their muscles fought desperately to awake. But with every step they took, the door moved further and further away. Greta's wicked cackling echoed through the never-ending diner as the rotten stench of stew saturated Jack and Emily's nostrils. I can't go any further, Emily cried, falling to her knees. I'm sorry, Jack. Jack knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her.
We have to try, Em. We can't give up.
With a wave of Greta's hand, Jack was flung backwards, thrown through the air across the room and crashing painfully into a table. Its legs gave way, and the wooden tabletop smashed into the floor below him, sending splinters across the floor. Jack was momentarily stunned by the onslaught of excruciating pain. He tried to breathe, but his lungs pulled no air. Greta's face filled with devilish joy as she watched the boy struggle to find his breath, twitching atop the remnants of the table.
You make the most delectable dessert,
she hissed. But Emily appeared right behind the woman, swinging a chair with all of her might and shattering it against Greta's back, who shrieked in agony, whipping around.
You little bitch,
she bellowed. Utterly enraged, Greta closed in on Emily, who had accidentally backed herself into a corner. Jack was still struggling to pull himself up from the floor. She had to think of something. Stay away, Emily cried, pulling the necklace from beneath her shirt. It was her grandmother's pendant, a small, pure silver charm that supposedly provided luck and protection, and though she didn't really believe in that stuff, she always felt better when she wore it. Greta hissed like a snake, recoiling. Behind her, Jack slowly and silently crawled towards the counter. You're powerless against the symbol of love and protection, Emily cried. But Greta burst into a fit of cackling laughter.
You think I give two shits about your dime store trinket?
She got closer and closer. her crooked, sharp nails extended for Emily's face. Just in time, Jack burst from behind the counter, smashing a pair of pots and pans into the old woman's temples before dropping them with a clattering bang to the floor. The wicked witch was stunned and dizzy, and Jack used the moment to snatch the sack of salt from his back pocket, throwing it forth into the woman's eyes and painfully blinding her. Emily ran from the corner as Greta fell backwards to the floor, screaming in agony and wiping blindly through the air in all directions. Emily smashed another chair against the woman as Jack shoved her across the floor towards the counter. Greta continued to flail around and scream in agony, her long nails lacerating the skin around her eyes as she desperately tried to shake the salt from them.
The dime store trinket may not have stopped you,
Jack said.
But our grandmother's the one that taught us that salt repels evil.
With a battle cry that shook the walls of the diner, the witch took a final lunge in Jack's direction. He smashed his body into hers, colliding painfully but knocking her closer to the kitchen, closer to the bubbling cauldron. The blinded woman thrashed and flailed, and with one final blow, she lost her balance, tumbling backwards into the vat with a sizzling splash. Where the stew touched her skin, the flesh melted away, and her painful screams echoed through the entire forest.
What have you done?
She cried.
What have you done?
As she boiled before them, Jack and Emily saw pulsating glimpses of the many faces below, the beautiful young woman and the horrible wicked witch, with so many in between. The diner began to crumble, and Jack and Emily made a final dash for the door. This time, it stayed put, bursting open with the tinkling of the bell as the cold night air embraced them. Just as they made it to safety, the diner collapsed in on itself. Greta's screams of agony echoed above the trees. Jack and Emily kept running until they reached the car haphazardly parked at the edge of the lot. Breathing heavily, they climbed inside. Jack fumbled with the keys, finally managing to start the engine. Strangely, the fuel gauge now rested just above half empty, and the fog began to lift as they pulled away. The siblings drove in silence, shaken by the horror they had faced. They didn't know what to do other than continue on to their grandmother's house, where they found the kindly old woman waiting up for them with open arms. The pair didn't want to worry her, though, at least not so late at night, so they explained away their extended delay as a mistaken wrong turn that got them lost.
You rest your weary heads, and we'll talk more in the morning,
their grandmother said.
Sounds perfect.
We can catch up over coffee on the porch, or have a picnic by the pond.
She was so excited to see her grandchildren, and they were happier to see her than she could possibly know.
You two just think about what you'd like to eat,
she said,
and I'll make us something hot to go.
Jack and Emily looked at each other, terror-struck by the familiar phrase. Then Emily shook the fear off and smiled back at her grandmother.
As long as there's not any stew.
On the northeast corner of my vineyard in central North Carolina, there stood a small frame house of the simplest construction. It was built of pine lumber and contained but one room, to which one window gave light and one door admission. Against one end of the house, and occupying half its width, there stood a huge brick chimney. The crumbling mortar had left large cracks between the bricks. The bricks themselves had begun to scale off in large flakes, leaving the chimney sprinkled with unsightly blotches. These evidences of decay were but partially concealed by a creeping vine, which extended its slender branches hither and thither in an ambitious but futile attempt to cover the whole chimney. One day, my wife requested me to build her a new kitchen. Of course, I had to build it. To save expense, I decided to tear down the old schoolhouse and use the lumber, which was in a good state of preservation, in the construction of the new kitchen. I made an estimate of the amount of material contained in it and found that I would have to buy several 100 feet of lumber additional in order to build the new kitchen, according to my wife's plan. One morning, old Julius McAdoo, our colored coachman, drove my wife and me over to the sawmill from which I meant to order the new lumber. Our carriage jolted over the half-rotted corduroy road which traversed the swamp, and then climbed the long hill leading to the sawmill. When we reached the mill, the foreman had gone over to a neighboring farmhouse, probably to smoke or gossip, and we were compelled to await his return before we could transact our business. We remained seated in the carriage, a few rods from the mill, and watched the leisurely movements of the mill hands. We had not waited long before a huge pine log was placed in position. The machinery of the mill was set in motion, and the circular saw began to eat its way through the log with a loud whir which resounded throughout the vicinity of the mill. Julius perceptibly shuddered. "What's the matter, Uncle Julius?" inquired my wife, who is of a very sympathetic turn of mind. "Does the noise affect your nerves?"
"No, Miss Annie, I ain't nervous, but that saw, cutting and grinding through that stick of timber, moaning and groaning and squeaking, takes me back to old times. Reminds me of Po Sandy." He lengthened out the Po Sandy with a pathetic intonation which touched a responsive chord in our own hearts.
"And who was poor Sandy?"
asked my wife, who takes a deep interest in the stories she hears from the lips of old plantation workers. "Sandy," said Julius, "used to belong to old Mars Marabou McSwain. Mars Marabou's place was on the other side of the swamp, right next to your place. One time, when Sandy was lent out as usual, a speculator came by, wanting to swap Sandy's wife off for a new woman. When Sandy came back, Mars Marabou gave him $1 and said he was monstrous sorry for breaking up the family. But times was hard in Money's case, and so he made the trade. Sandy was terrible sad about losing his wife, but he saw there was no use crying, and being that he liked the looks of the new woman, he took up with her after she'd been on the plantation a month or so. Sandy and Tenny hadn't been living together for more than 2 months before Mars Marabou's old uncle, who lived down in Robeson County, sent up to find out if Mars Marabou could lend him a good hand for a month or so. Sandy's master was one of those easygoing folks, wanting to please everybody, and he said yes, he'd lend him Sandy. It was monstrous hard on Sandy to take him away from Tenny. It was so far down to Robeson that he didn't have no chance of coming back to see her till the time was up. Tenny was mighty sad when Sandy told her, "I'm getting monstrous tired of going round so much. I ain't got no home, nor no massa, nor no mistress, no nothing. I can't even keep a wife. My other old woman was sold away without my getting any chance for to tell her goodbye, and now I got to go off and leave you. I wish I was a tree, or a stump, or a rock, or something that would stay on the plantation for a while."
After Sandy got through talking, Tenny didn't say no word, just sat there by the fire, studying and studying. Finally, she up and says, "Sandy, is I ever told you I was a conjure woman?" Sandy had never dreamt of nothing like that, and he made a great admiration when he heard what Tenny said. "I ain't done no conjure work for 15 years or more, and when I got religion, I made my mind I wouldn't goof for nobody no more. But some things I don't believe it's no sin for to do, and if you don't want to go down to Robeson, I can fix things so you won't have to. You say the word, I'll turn you to whatever you want to be, and you can stay right where you want, as long as you mind to." Sandy said he don't care. He's willing to do anything for to stay close to Tenny. So she asked if he wanted to be turned into a rabbit. "No rabbit," he said. "The dogs might get after me." So she asked if she should turn him into a wolf. "No, everybody's scared of a wolf. I don't want nobody to be scared of me." So she asked if she should turn him into a mockingbird. "No, a hawk might catch me. I want to be turned to something that'll stay in one place." "I could turn you into a tree," she said. "You won't have to move for years, but I can turn you back once in a while so you can get something to eat and to hear what's going on." So Tenny took him down by the edge of the swamp and turned him into a big pine tree. And the next morning, as some of the field hands were going along, they saw a tree they didn't remember ever seeing before. Old Mars Marabou figured Sandy done runned away, so he got his dogs out. But the last place they could track Sandy was to the foot of that tree. The dogs barked and bayed and pawed and tried to climb it, and Mars Marabou figured Sandy must have climbed up on the tree and jump off onto a mule or something. When Sandy had been gone long enough for folks to think he got clean away, Tenny used to go down to the woods at night and turn him back, and then they'd slip up to the cabin and sit by the fire and talk, but they had to be most careful, else somebody would have seen them and spoiled the whole thing. So Tenny always turned Sandy back in the morning early, before anybody was stirring. But Sandy didn't get along without his trials and tribulations. One day a woodpecker come along and pecked at the tree, and next time Sandy was turned back, he had a little round hole in his arm. After that, Tenny set a hawk to keep watch on the tree. Another time, Mars Marabou sent a worker out for some turpentine, and that man chopped into the tree and hacked the bark up 2 or 3 feet to let the turpentine run. The next time Sandy was turned back, he had a big scar on his left leg. After that, Tenny set a hornet to watch the tree, and when the worker come back again to cut the other side, the hornet stung him so hard that the axe slipped and cut his foot about fully off. When Tenny see so many things happening to the tree, she figured she'd turn Sandy into something else, and she made up her mind to fix up a mixture that would turn them both into foxes or something, so they could run away and go to somewheres where they could live like white folks. But there ain't no telling what's gonna happen in this world. Tenny got the night set for her and Sandy to run away, when that very day one of Mars Marabou's son rode up to the big house in his buggy and said his wife was monstrous sick. He wanted his mammy to lend him a woman to nurse his wife, so they say they gonna send Tenny. She was a good nurse. Tenny tried to make up some excuse for her to get away and hide till night, when she would have everything fixed up for her and Sandy. She say she want to go to her cabin to get her bonnet, but they say her bonnet don't matter, that her handkerchief was good enough. Then Tenny say she wanted to get her best frock, but they say she don't need no more frock, and when that one got dirty, she could clean the one she was wearing. So Tenny had to get in the buggy and go along with young Mars Duncan to his plantation, which was more than 20 miles away. The po' gal knew Sandy must be wondering why she didn't come back no more. While Tenny was away, Mars Marabou took a notion to build him a new kitchen. And being as he had lots of timber on his place, he began to look round for a tree to have the lumber sawed out. Since Tenny was gone, there was nobody around to watch the tree. The two men who cut down the tree say they never had such a hard time with the tree before. The axes would glanch off, and they kept making no progress in the wood, and all of the creaking and shaking and wobbling you ever saw would not commence that tree to fall. When they got the tree all trimmed up, they chained it up to the timber wagon and started for the sawmill. But they had a hard time getting there. First, they got stuck in the mud when they was crossing the swamp, and it was 2 or 3 hours before they could get out. When they started again, the chains kept coming loose, and they had to keep stopping and stopping for to hitch the logs up again. When they finally climbed the hill to the sawmill, the logs broke loose and rolled down the hill in amongst the trees. It took about a half day more to get it all hauled up to the sawmill. The next day, after they made it to the mill, Tenny came home. When she got back to her cabin, the first thing she done was to run down to the woods and see how Sandy was getting on. When she saw the stump standing there, with the sap running out of it, and the limbs laying scattered, she about went out of her mind. She ran back to her cabin, got her gopher mixture, and followed the tracks of the timber wagon to the sawmill. The hands at the sawmill had just loaded the big log on the carriage and was starting up the saw when the woman came running up the hill, all out of breath, crying and whining, and she came right into the mill and threw herself on the log, right in front of the saw, hollering and crying for Sandy to forgive her and not think hard of her, for it wasn't no fault of her own. Then Tenny remembered the tree didn't have no ears, and she started getting her gopher mixture ready to turn Sandy back, when the mill hands took hold of her arms with a rope and fastened her to one of the posts in the sawmill. They cut the logs up into boards, right before her eyes. And it was mighty hard work, for all the squeaking and moaning and groaning from the log as the saw was cutting through it. They greased up the saw, but that didn't stop the fuss. It kept right on until it was all sawed up. When the overseer came from breakfast, and the hands tell him about the crazy woman what had come running in hollering and going on and throwing herself before the saw, the overseer sent 2 or 3 hands to take Tenny back to her master's plantation. She was out of her mind for a long time, and her master had her locked up in the smokehouse till she got over her spells. Mars Marabou took and hauled the lumber from the sawmill and put up his new kitchen. He didn't know what to do with old Tenny, but seeing as she didn't do no harm to nobody, only went around moaning and groaning and shaking her head, he figured to let her stay and nurse the little childrens when the mammies was to work in the fields. The new kitchen wasn't much use. They could hear something moaning and groaning about in the nighttime, and when the wind would blow, they heard hollering and squeaking like it was in great pain and suffering. It got so after a while that it was all Mars Marabou's wife could do to get a woman to stay in the kitchen long enough to do the cooking. And by, it got so Mars Marabou's wife herself was scared to go out in the yard after dark. And they all knowed the kitchen was haunted by Sandy's spirit. So Mars Marabou took the kitchen down and used the lumber to build that old schoolhouse he was talking about pulling down. The schoolhouse was used in the daytime, but on dark nights, folks going along the road would hear queer sounds and see queer things. Poor old Tenny used to go down there at night and wander around the schoolhouse, and everyone figured she went to talk to Sandy's spirit. On one winter morning, when one of the boys went to school early to start the fire, what should he find but poor old Tenny laying on the floor, stiff, cold, and dead. Nothing particular the matter with her. She had just grieved herself to death for her Sandy. Mars Marabou didn't shed no tears. He thought Tenny was crazy, and there wasn't no telling what she might do next. There ain't much room in this world for crazy white folks, let alone a crazy spade. When the war broke out, the schools stopped, and the old schoolhouse has been standing empty ever since, except for the haints. But folks say that old schoolhouse and any other house that got any of that lumber in it sawed out of the tree that Sandy turned into is going to be haunted till the last piece of plank has rotted and crumbled into dust.